Nothing in this podcast or on our website should be construed as medical advice. Consult your healthcare provider for your individual nutritional and medical needs. The information presented is based on our research and is strictly that of the author and not necessarily those of any professional group or other individual.
Hi, I'm Sue Becker from Bread Beckers. Welcome to Sue's Healthy Minutes. I'm so excited you've joined me today, and I hope this episode encourages you and allows you to find the answers you have been praying for the health of you and your family.
We have a special treat for you today on Sue's Healthy Minutes podcast. Frequently, Sue is asked to appear as a special guest on other podcasts and channels. And today, we are going to feature one of those very special conversations, with permission, of course. In this conversation with the Vitality Made Simple podcast, you will hear a lot of familiar information along with some additional topics that Sue doesn't always get to share. So grab a slice of bread and enjoy as we indulge in this episode of Sue's Healthy Minutes.
Welcome to Vitality Made Simple. This is the podcast that equips you to feel better, look better, and to enjoy better relationships. Life is all about relationships. We want to feel our best so that we can invest in the people in our lives. Well, it's a joy to welcome Sue Becker. Welcome, Sue.
Thank you so much for having me, Debbie. It is just such a privilege and honor to be able to speak to your audience.
Oh, the honor is all ours. And folks, today you're going to probably end up a little bit hungry. You're going to gain a lot of clarity. I do know that everybody may not fall in line with what we're talking about today, but this is going to be a perspective but I think we all need. And yes. Sue has a company called Bread Beckers, Sue Becker Bread Beckers. And she is a food scientist. She actually worked for Kraft for almost 5 years. So she's had lots and lots of experience in the food industry. She has 9 children. And at last count, I heard you had 18 grandchildren.
Yes, number 19 is on the way. And we just recently found out we're going to be great-grandparents at some point this year. So, yeah.
Oh, that's great. And I don't know if we'll get into it, but when she talks about how her kids have not been sick, I mean, you're going to be so impressed. So we're going to talk about real bread today, real bread. And we're going to differentiate between what's in the grocery store.
Yes.
So I love it, Sue, that you're coming from a scientific background, from the background of boots on the ground mother. And then, of course, you started a business in 1992. So now you have thousands of testimonials from people. Yeah. So first of all, tell us about your bread. It's just so different than anything else that we've heard about.
Yes, it is. And, you mentioned that I was a food scientist, and I graduated from the University of Georgia, studied after I graduated, continued to study healthy eating and biochemistry. And that was my jumping off place. But in 1991, I was introduced to a healthy eating concept that radically changed my life. I was through a medical publication. I was introduced to the whole history of flour milling, what began to happen in the early 1900s to our flour and then, of course, our bread. So with flour spoils, and that's one thing people don't understand. Grains are one of the most nutrient-dense food God has given us. Genesis chapter 1, verse 29, he gave us 2 kinds of food. Plants that bear fruit for our food. So those are your fruits and vegetables. But then he gave us plants that bear seed for our food. What's the difference? Fruits and vegetables, wonderfully nutritious. We should all be eating them, but they spoil over time. They decay, they rot, they lose nutritional value. We may not be seeing it, but every day they're stored in the refrigerator or on the counter, even on the tree, they're losing. Not so with grains. Grains are storable because they're the seed. God created them that way so we would have next year's crop. So left whole and intact, grains like wheat and spelt and barley and corn are storable. But what happens when you mill that into flour? All those nutrients, all those vitamins, all those minerals are now exposed to the air. and a process known as oxidation begins to take place immediately. You don't have to be a food scientist to understand oxidation. We've all cut an apple, cut an avocado, and watched it turn brown. That's oxidation. What we don't see, just like with those fruits and vegetables, is the loss of vitamins and minerals. There's some discrepancy as to how much is lost, but nonetheless, that flour loses nutritional value, but it spoils. And prior to the 1900s, people knew this. And so they made their own bread. They milled their own flour, or communities were built up around the local miller so they could go get their flour more freshly milled, made their bread. But someone discovered because when you mill it into flour, and if you've never done that, the bran, the outer portion of the grain, and the germ, which is the interior where all your vitamin E and those fats and oils are, when you mill it, those stay a little bit coarse. So in the late 1800s, early 1900s, they discovered that they could sift. We've all seen grandma's sifter, probably. You can sift those coarser parts out and leave just the white flour portion. So it led to the invention of the steel rolling mills that would sift the bran and germ away, producing this long-lasting white flour that, for all practical purposes, is nothing more than protein and starch. All your vitamins, minerals, fiber, your fats and oils are in that bran and germ portion. So wonderful discovery, so we thought. And eventually the local millers went out of business. Everybody was like, hallelujah, I don't have to mill my own flour anymore. So the steel rolling mills took over the market, and white flour, white bread became food for the masses. So the first time in the history, really, of the world, white flour was the food for everyone. So what began to happen, though, they thought this is a wonderful discovery, technology and improvement and industrialization. 3 diseases became epidemic shortly after the white flour, white bread took over the market. Beriberi, which is a vitamin B1 deficiency. It's a nervous disorder. Pellagra is known as the disease of the 4 Ds. It's dysentery, dermatitis, skin issues, bowel issues, mental insanity, and ultimately death. People were dying from pellagra. And this was something that they had not seen before. In fact, the first year that pellagra was discovered, 30,000 cases that first year. And it was actually right here in Atlanta, Georgia, near, where I'm from. And then, of course, anemia was another issue. No one was expecting this, and it puzzled health officials everywhere. And eventually they traced it to all those B vitamins and iron and the vitamin E all being lost when they sifted the bran and germ out. So health officials went to the miller, said, you got to put that back in, put the bran and germ out. We can't do this. And they were like, nah, we've found another market. And I love this. No, that was sarcasm. I love the byproducts of the food industry. So they said, no, the bran and germ are now byproducts of the milling process, and we're selling that to the cattle feed and animal feed industry, which is still done today. And they said, so we're not willing to give up that very lucrative market. It would take until 1948 for the government to step in and mandate that they had to do something. They had to fix the flour. So they chose to enrich, and it was government mandated. They had to put 3 B vitamins, B1, B2, B3, and iron into the flour. Problem is they're using synthetic vitamins and iron. And this was something that was so interesting to me as a food scientist studying. My degree is food processing, everything you do to help that food sit on the shelf safely and without spoilage. So when I would read that word enriched, with all my background, it didn't dawn on me that this wasn't a good thing that the food companies were doing. Whereas I thought, us food scientists, we're helping you. We're making this flour better. That's not the case at all. For the 35 to 40 nutrients that are lost when you take the bran and germ away, they put 4 back in, 3 synthetic B vitamins and iron. It would take 50 more years, 1998, for them to watch the rising incidence of neural tube birth defects, for them to go, we got a problem. It might be the missing folic acid, or folate is the natural term. So now we're putting a synthetic folic acid into the flour. So And that's created a whole host of other problems. And if that were not enough, then, the residual oils that were in the flour, just from being processed with it, they started turning yellow. So maybe we better bleach the flour. So a product called nitrogen trichloride was used for more than 40 years, and they took it off the market because they found it caused seizures and hyperactivity in dogs. So, but a chlorine derivative is still being used. Benzoyl peroxide is another bleaching agent that causes respiratory issues and destroys B vitamins and vitamin E. And then, of course, potassium bromate is a dough enhancer. So these are how we got here. And the difference, I hope you can see, in the bread in the store and wheat is very significant. And that's what is so sad to me, is because everybody has jumped on the bread is bad bandwagon, and they're not. And then they've linked that with wheat. So wheat is inflammatory. Wheat is causing diabetes. Wheat is this. Wheat is bad. Wheat is causing bowel issues. They're not differentiating between that stuff in the store and the real whole kernel of grain wheat. And part of the problem too is, so in the 90s, when whole grains became popular, some companies started doing 100% whole grain bread. Well, another thing I don't think people realize is when those steel rolling mills came on the scene, it displaced the big, whole grain mills. So now to make whole grain flour, they put some of the bran and germ back into that white flour. According to a government standard, supposedly it's recombined to the original, but who knows? But then if you read that label, they're adding all kinds of preservatives and extra protein, which is called, the protein in the grains called gluten. They're adding extra of that to that 100% whole grain. So people are buying that and they're not seeing any difference. It's still inflammatory, and it's because it's not the same as milling that grain fresh and making all of your bread with that freshly milled whole grain. Does that make sense? I hope it does. And it saddens me because wheat and grains, whole grains, are the most nutrient dense food God has given us. He gave it to us in the beginning. Why? Because it was a reliable food. It was a storable food that did not lose its nutritional value. And, what did he tell Joseph to store for the lean years that were coming? Grains. And it saddens me to see bread getting such a bad rap. I understand, but real whole grains are a totally different story.
Exactly. And I really appreciate that you started with that story, Sue, because I don't think people know that. I think we just think whole grains, and I don't think people even realize that a lot of times you see wheat bread in the store and you assume what's in it. It might even just be caramel color. And in looking at the history of white flour, you see that not only did they refine the flour, they solved their pest problem in the factories, because the mice and rats didn't want to eat the flour once it was white flour, correct?
Exactly. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, there's a scripture, I think it's Proverbs 4:12. It says, there's a way that seems right to a man, but the end thereof is death. And, it looked like a great technological advantage that now the flour won't spoil. We've made this thing that's so great, and it's not so great. And I love to tell the story that I bought a loaf of 100% whole grain bread, double wrapped, so you might know the brand, for a visual aid. Well, I bought it more than 2 or 3 years ago. It is still on my shelf, my visual aid shelf. It has not molded. It has not rotted. The last loaf that I had to replace it, because the last loaf, after several years, disintegrated. It never molded. It never spoiled. It turned to dust. I'm like, this was a well-known 100 brand of 100% whole grain bread. That's pretty significant. That's nothing like the bread I make. In a week, my bread is green and yellow and blue and all kinds of colors.
Crawling with critters. Yes, it reminds me, Sue, about 15 years ago, our son Sam and I went to Ecuador on a mission trip. And on the plane, we were served this sandwich. This was like in January, say.
Yeah.
And this sandwich had an October 15th expiration date.
Yeah.
And I mean, I took a picture of it because it was like hilarious. You just can't imagine what could be in it. Well, tell about your trips to like Haiti and what you see there.
Yeah. Well, that's interesting. So, God put on my heart then a passion once I saw the bread changed the health of our family so drastically. And we were eating real because I had studied and I was a cook. So we were eating real meat, real fruit, real vegetables. But when that meal came into my home, exactly 34 years ago, because my birthday is next week, I got my meal for my birthday. The health of our family changed drastically. We were not a real sickly lot, but twice a year, at least, I would get strep throat. I had chronic sinus congestion, constipation, headaches, and my kids had their share of ear infections and all of that. I had 5 kids when I started, went on to have number 6, number 7. But our health changed so drastically that I began to study what is in this bread. And then when I'd share the bread and other people would call me and say, my cholesterol dropped 85 points in 1 month and this is all I've changed. So I studied and studied and studied and I found that it's all in the bread, everything that we need, to sustain life and promote health. So I started a ministry called Real Bread Outreach to help people that truly cannot afford it. Some people say, I don't have time, can't afford it. Most of us can, but some people truly can't. So I clipped along with this ministry from 2007 to 2016. But in 2016, some pastors in Haiti that run orphanages and schools called me and they said, could you bring this bread to Haiti? My first thought was, it'll be moldy by the time I ship it there. I wasn't thinking going there, getting them the equipment, but we did. We made our first trip in 2016. And set them up. One orphanage and school had about 150 children in the orphanage and 500 to 800 kids in the school. It's a little less now because of the unrest there, but I taught 5 teenage boys how to make bread, freshly milled. They got up every morning before school, and then some would come in after school and make bread for the kids in the orphanage and then for the kids in the school. And it was a real blessing to them. And it's so fascinating to me when I started going there. Yes, they have some health issues, but nothing like what we see here in America. The kids' teeth are perfectly straight, and I get it. There could be some genetics there, but no peanut allergies, no gluten allergies. Someone asked me, they said, did you have to get permission with the government to take these rolls into the school? And I'm like, no. And we take it in a big tub and we hand them to the kids without even a napkin, and we smear them with peanut butter. And this is just not an issue. And I'm like, what is going on in our country? And I think it's several things. They're eating predominantly rice and beans, fresh mangoes, fresh pineapple, fresh bananas. Yes, there's a starvation problem, but there's also trees and produce everywhere there. So, and they don't have the vaccinations and they don't have access to all the medicines and antibiotics. They have access to prayer when they get sick. And so that was a real blessing to be able to take the bread there. We worked with another smaller orphanage, and they said that they saw some of the kids' skin issues where they were losing their pigmentation. That resolved. Also, you'll see their hair will be real orange, and that's a mineral deficiency. That improved and changed with the bread. You started seeing their hair become black again. It was very, very significant. 2019, we were able to build a bakery, which I'm so glad we got that done before the COVID epidemic. We worked with another orphanage. They're feeding about 1,200 school children a day, even today. During COVID, the first orphanage where we worked with, they had just put in a hen laying operation, and supplies were cut off. They couldn't even get out of the campus to go get groceries. So for a while there, the kids were getting an egg and a roll a day, and that's what they were eating. So we've been real blessed to have that going and just knowing that we're bringing the best nutrition possible. And, and white flour's there now too. It's not just an American thing because everybody wants to live like the rich Americans. So Yeah, it was a real blessing when I shared kind of what I just did, the history of white flour, with some of the nannies and the workers for the children. When I shared that with them, they were like, "What?" And they couldn't believe it. And I said, "Yeah." And even here, like, I had gone into the market one day, and there was this big bag, 50-pound bag. And when I say the market, it's on the street. People lay out their quilts and put their produce, and you buy it right off the street like that. Well, there was a bag there with the top rolled back and a little tin cup in it. And when I looked at it, I'm like, this looks just like bran, wheat bran or in germ, it could tell it was very coarse. So I asked the young man that was with me, I said, what is this? And he goes, he couldn't remember the term bran and germ. He goes, the stuff they take out of the flour. And I said, well, what are they selling it for here? And he said, oh, it's pig feed. People come and buy that as pig feed. And I'm like, you've got to be kidding. The people are starving and eating this terrible white rice and white bread, white flour, and the pigs are getting the bran and germ. When I told that to the nannies, all of a sudden my translator quit translating and there was all this Creole talking going on. And I said, what's happening? He goes, they just realized why the pigs are fat and the people are not. The people are starving. So, we see it. And I saw the same in Tanzania when we built a bakery there. They polished the bran off of rice so that it won't spoil. And they pre-crack the corn and sell the bran and germ part to chicken feed and regrind the white part for the dishes that they make out of corn flour. So it's everywhere. And yet we're hoping to change that. So.
Well, you are changing it, Sue. And just the satiety that results. Probably about 9 years ago, I had this wonderful patient named Joanne Chestnut, and she brings me in a jar of wheat berries and her handwritten real bread recipe. And in her way of doing it, I mean, I've learned a lot from you, and this has been awesome, though. Her way is to grind it in the Vitamix.
Yeah.
So that's all I've been doing. And it just, it's what, 5 ingredients. It's, it's so simple. It's so fast but it's so satisfying.
Yes, it is. Yes, it is. And see, that's the thing that is sad too, because everybody thinks bread is going to make me fat. The bread in the store, I keep pointing, the bread in the store has no fiber. It's all been sifted away, which fiber is what fills you up. Right. It's slowly digested. So you feel full longer. You feel satisfied. Jesus compared himself to bread and he goes, I am the real bread of life. He who comes to me shall be satisfied. Mm-hmm. So it's very filling. It's very nutrient dense. I think people don't realize that one of the reasons we crave food is because we need nutrients that we aren't getting, and so that's a misnomer that bread will make you fat. Yes, the stuff in the store, devoid of all the fiber, devoid of all the nutrients, and then added sugar, the Twinkies, the donuts, the things like that we're consuming. But even just the plain bread. And like I said, even the whole grain bread, the glycemic index on that is no different than the white bread. And that's because it's not real. It's not real. And it's really sad because we have so many testimonies of people losing 25, 30 pounds in just a few months, and they're eating lots of bread. The more bread, the better. I just did an interview with a gentleman yesterday. His A1C has come down. He said, and it didn't start coming down. He had been milling and making bread for a while, but he was just eating like one piece in the morning. He goes, when I started eating a piece every meal, 2 or 3 pieces every meal, his blood sugar stabilized. So see, there again, everybody's being told, don't eat bread. It'll make you fat. Don't eat bread. It'll make your blood sugar go up. Yeah, the stuff in the store, the commercially processed bread, that's the cause of why we're where we are today. But if we can go back to real bread. And I think it's interesting that you said you mill it in a Vitamix, and that is certainly an option. But one of the funniest things to me, excuse me, one of the funniest things to me when I first started, so I would take bread everywhere. I mean, I'd take it to every function. I'd take coffee cake to church for bread, in the mornings, and every community gathering, I took some kind of bread or something, and people loved it because it's delicious. That's the other thing. Freshly milled flour is so different from the whole wheat flour we buy in the store. They've taken the oil out of that. So it's very dry and grainy and gritty and kind of bitter, doesn't have a great taste. So people were shocked. I'd take stuff and they go, I want your recipe for this. And I'm like, okay, I can give you the recipe, but I mill my own flour. It was so funny to me. First question, and they may do this, you may know this too. They'll go, you do what? And I'm like, I mill my own flour. And then they would go, where do you live? And that always tickled me at first. I think they were picturing a barn and the big, grist mill, or I lived by a river that had the grist mill. And, I use, behind me here is the Wonder Mill, and this is what I use. You can see I don't need a barn. It sits on my kitchen counter, and I have a tiny kitchen at home. So it sits right there, and it's still the most important appliance in my kitchen is my grain mill. So I use it every day. I mill flour, I make muffins, I make pancakes, I make bread. It's just my husband and I now at home. Our children are all grown and gone, but it's a very doable when you have the right tools. And it's just funny. Some people think it's hard, or like I said, you have to have a barn, or where do you get this? I'm like, nope, it's a little mill that just sits on your counter. So Wonder Mill is what I use. So
yeah, it's really quicker than going to the store. If people would, I mean, it's super fast.
Yeah.
Super fast.
And when you have snow and ice storm and bad weather, you don't have to dash out and go, oh, God, I hope I can get bread, before it's all gone. You got it. You just make it. Yeah.
Right. Well, and in your store, you sell all the different wheat berries, right? And you have a wonderful cookbook. Is it still a little red cookbook?
Yes, we have the little red. It's called the Recipe Collection. And then I have a published book that I put out in 2016 called the Essential Homegrown Flour Book. And this is a great book. It's got a lot of information up front on how-tos and even some of the nutritional information, a whole chapter on different grains. And so when we first started our business in 1992 in our home, our tiny little home that we still live in today, we started selling grain mills. Well, then the next question was, where can I get wheat? And I'm like, well, it's not something you can just go and buy in the grocery store, especially here in the southeastern United States. You might can in Oklahoma, but not so much here. Yeah. So we right away realized we needed to supply grain, and God gave us a Joseph vision of supplying his people with grain when they need it. So we took that to heart. We are now a pretty large grain supplier. We sell just about every kind of grain or bean you can imagine, dry. We bring it in by the semi-truckload, and we package it down in 6-gallon food grade buckets and we package it with carbon dioxide gas. So it's perfectly storable, protects it from rodents, from moisture and bugs, which are prevalent most anywhere. If you store it in bags or bins and things like that, you have the susceptibility of bugs and moisture. And of course, here in the Southeast, we are very humid. So early on, we were told you can't be a grain packaging facility in the South. Well, we proved them wrong. We can do it. And like I said, and then we have what we call co-ops all over the United States now. Used to be predominantly in the southeastern United States, from Miami to Maryland. We had over 120. I don't even know how many we have now. Ohio, Arkansas, Texas, Mississippi, Tennessee. They're everywhere now. And we are a large grain supplier, and we do sell it in 6-gallon buckets. Then we do package it down into 1-gallon pails and 2-pound bags. But then we also have all kinds of whole food, real food supplies. We sell extra virgin olive oil by the 3-liter can. We sell raw unpasteurized honey. And then, of course, all the equipment. Grain mills. We have multiple models of grain mills, and the finest mixer in the world, the Anchor Room sitting behind me, greatest bread machine. And that's the thing. We want to help you do this. And if it's difficult and very time consuming, most people are going to say, I'm too busy. I can't do this. But you can mill a pound of flour in less than 30 seconds, 5 minutes, load it in your bread machine, and come back to a baked loaf of bread. So that's what we're all about here, showing you how to make bread a part of your daily life, your daily diet, and why it's the healthiest thing you could be eating. I always laugh when my kids were growing up. I don't know if you ever did this, but about 3 or 4 years old, they get to where they don't want to eat. They just kind of want to play. So you make a sandwich and they didn't want to eat. So you take the meat off the sandwich and say, here, just eat the meat. Well, that was before bread. After bread, I'd take the meat off the sandwich and say, just eat the bread. It was the healthiest thing you could be eating. And that's kind of what drew us to Haiti. The pastors were like, these kids are coming to school starving. We can't afford to feed them a meal, but grains are the most nutrient dense food God has given us. In that one roll, just about everything their little growing bodies need is in a roll. So we could do that. And that's why they asked me, would I come and teach them how to make bread? So for some of those kids, that roll might be the only thing they're getting in a day. I watched them, several of them at school, when we'd pass out the rolls, they would wrap it in a napkin and put it in their little backpack so they would have it and not have to go to bed hungry. So, but that, and the pastors and the workers there, they've seen a difference, that this is satisfying. So, and at least something they could do. Yeah.
Well, and they probably have more capacity to learn and behave in school. It makes me wonder, Sue, about some specific stories you've seen of healing, hearing about the potassium bromide. I knew that's been added to the bread. And of course, that's a halogen that is a thyroid disruptor. It displaces iodine on the thyroid. So I would suspect that some of the stories have been thyroid related, but tell us some of your stories that come to your mind.
Oh my goodness.
People feeling better.
Yeah. Oh gosh. The list goes on and on. I have hundreds of, I call them It's the Bread stories on my podcast called Sue's Healthy Minutes. But for me, I had struggled with constipation all my life. The milk, and I knew whole wheat flour was better, from all my studies. And I'm like, I'd try to buy that nasty flour from the store and make bread, and it was terrible. So I just kind of gave up and bought the wheat bread that you described, which was white flour and caramel coloring. But anyway, the mill came into our home. I was so excited after reading what I read in that medical journal. And so I pulled that mill out of the box, ground some flour, made bread, and I pooped the next morning. And this was like, yeah, happy dance. Yes. I was like, what was this? Outside of chemical laxatives, because I did not want to go there. Right. I tried all kinds of natural things. They worked if I did them, but they weren't part of your daily routine. They were odd things to do. Mm-hmm. I made bread and that happened. And I'm like, whoa, something is really different. And I tell people, I laugh and I'm like, you maybe don't want to know this, but I've not been constipated now since 1991. And America is the most constipated nation in the world. Yeah. It is no longer an old person's problem. My kids always thought it was old people talked about it. But I have moms come to me. I mean, one mom, I'll never forget, tears. She goes, you saved my child's life. 4 years old. She said, I took him to the doctor and the doctor said, constipation's just the way of things these days. There's nothing really you can do about it. I'm like, what? Yeah. And he said, here's this medicine. And she goes, he's only 4. He goes, oh, it's okay. I have hundreds of children on this medicine. And she said she just cried. A neighbor baked her a loaf of bread. Her child pooped with no issues. And she said, it is amazing. So, and then some people might go, well, I'm not constipated. I go 10 times a day or 5 times a day. Only God can make something that can correct both. The fiber that's in that bread can either soften that stool so you'll go every day, or bulk up that stool so you go more normally. One of my favorite stories, well, I used to call her an older woman, but I'm older than she is. She was then, yeah. Yeah. And I was like, this older woman, she was the mom of a customer of ours. The daughter came in and she said, my mom has bleeding bowel issues. She's been on steroids for 10 years. Oh, yeah. She can't sleep through the night.
Depressed. She
can't sleep through the night. She has to get up 5 times in the night to go to the bathroom. She can't leave her house because she has such irritable bowel, bleeding bowels. She said they told her to go gluten-free and that maybe that would help. But see, that's not the issue. The issue is the bread in the store. Our ministry gave her a grain mill. She went up. They were missionaries. So she had 2 weeks furlough. She said, Sue, within 5 days, my mother was sleeping through the night. By the end of the 2 weeks, she totally had her life back. That's pretty impressive. And how many bowel issues do we have in this country? And it's almost, I think it is epidemic. Then another thing for me, my sinus congestion all went away. I had chronic postnasal drip and sinus congestion. I had to take antihistamines at night to go to sleep because I couldn't breathe. within a month, that was all gone. And it's because the toxins were being taken out of my body. I think people don't understand that. Mucus formation is your body's response to toxins. It's so you can blow it out your nose, cough it up, or whatever. And I think we don't make that correlation. And so now that my bowels were moving every day, and people don't think about that's trash. That's what your body said I don't want, and take out the trash. So now that that was eliminated, my sinus congestion went away. My energy levels, I had 5 young children. I homeschooled. I had nursing baby. You know, I noticed in that first few days that I had a lot more energy. My sugar cravings went away. People crave sweets because our bodies were designed by God. Don't let anybody tell you different, to use carbohydrates for energy. That's your brain's food. That's your body's food. That's your cell's food. It converts it to sugars. But when we're not getting it, or we get too much at one time, we get the highs, the lows, the drops. Well, then when you're low, you're craving sugar because you need energy. But with the bread, the fiber there and the complex carbohydrates slowly broken down into sugars, slow release of those sugars into your body as it's needed, sustained energy, sustained blood sugar levels. And it's just incredible. And I'm trying to remember all the other testimonies. We just had a lady write me. She was on my podcast a few weeks ago, but I got an email from her this morning because the big thing is with thyroid, Hashimoto's hypothyroidism. Right. Go off of gluten. Gluten's bad. There's no scientific correlation. I've searched and searched and searched. It's not there. I agree, the bread in the store, but she just told me today she's been consistently milling the grain, making the bread. Her thyroid, she's been able to reduce her thyroid hormone prescription every few months now since she started the bread, and she's dropped it. And she's hoping that she'll start seeing those antibodies go down. But, you know, this is just, there's other issues and we're attributing it to gluten when it's other issues with the bread. The fiber's gone, the nutrients gone, the fake B vitamins, folic acid, that's coming out now, the MTHFR gene mutation. It's big, and yet wheat is being blamed, and that's not the issue. Yeah.
Right.
So,
well, there's also something, Sue, so satisfying about preparing food. I think it's the design, God's design for us to be making things that gets our bodies ready to accept the food. It starts the digestive process. I mean, the first thing that I tell my patients, if you change one thing, change how you eat before what you eat, and sit down and say a word of thanks, you know, thank God for your food, and take a few deep breaths and put your fork down after every bite. I mean, those simple things, but preparing food like that and smelling it bake, it all gets you ready. So,
and it's so satisfying, and to know that I am putting good food that's nourishing my body, not taking away from the health of my body. I think that's what so many people don't realize too. The wart stories are hundreds now. Those are so amazing. I mean, in a matter of I have my own wart story. My son's warts went away, and he had them for 5 years the first month of making the bread, but we have hundreds of wart stories. And a lot of times that's why somebody gave somebody some bread, because their child was struggling with warts. But the most incredible was years ago in Richmond, Virginia. A mom came to hear me speak. I shared my wart story. 2 people shared their wart stories that had come, and she came to me with tears. Her 17-year-old daughter, had over 500 warts. She had gotten them when she was 12. They burned them all off, but warts are a virus. Just taking off the manifestation of them doesn't do anything for the virus. And she heard me speak about the vitamin E protecting the integrity of every cell in your body. And I think what we don't realize is that viruses, unlike bacteria, they have to use your cell's reproductive system to reproduce. Bacteria can reproduce on their own. They have to invade your cell. If our cell membrane is weakened because vitamin E, the antioxidant, is not provided to protect those cells, then we're going to be more susceptible to a viral invasion. And vitamin E is very limited in our food supply out there. The processed foods, very little. Yet one slice of our real bread 100% of the USDA recommended daily amount. One slice. Now, I'm not totally bought into the USDA recommended daily amount, but that should tell you something. One slice of our bread, because the flour has to be freshly milled. Wheat is the richest food source of vitamin E. But here's the exciting end to that story. So this lady heard me speak. I talked about vitamin E and how it could help your body fight warts. She came to my table. She tasted the bread. She goes, the bread's delicious. She goes, I like to cook and we have to eat. And she goes, how much is the meal? And I told her, and she goes, I paid more than that for one prescription that they put my daughter on that didn't work and none of us could eat it. She goes, what have I got to lose? 2.5 weeks. Every one of those 500 warts were gone on that young girl's body. 2.5 weeks. And we hear stories like that all the time. A month. Most of the time it's 2 to 3 weeks. One grandma came up to me and she said, I keep my grandchildren. She goes, they don't really like the bread. So I make them the flaxseed chocolate chip oatmeal cookies out of the freshly milled flour. She goes, my grandson had 36 warts on his hands. They're all gone in 3 weeks. What? And people say, well, that's anecdotal. You can't be after 1,000 testimonies, thousands of testimonies. And I studied it and found out vitamin E has been known to help you get rid of warts. And the exciting thing to me, think about this for a minute. We're all concerned about viruses, right? Because there's no treatment. Antibiotics can't treat a virus. If changing the bread to freshly milled flour can get rid of a virus, or hundreds of warts that you've had for 5, sometimes even 10 years in a matter of weeks, what other viruses could this bread protect you from? That's something I think we need to think about. And Dr. Wilfred Shute, who pioneered vitamin E research, he said, and he didn't write books on freshly milled flour. He treated heart disease. That's another thing, heart disease with vitamin E. He said when the steel rolling mills came on the scene in the early 1900s and the bran and the germs started being fractured, he called it, from the grain, we lost the most potent antithrombin, blood thinning agent in vitamin E that natural food supplied. That's pretty significant. And others, they trace the demise and the downfall of America's health to the flour being sifted and white bread coming on the scene. Heart disease was never a problem till after 1920. Few isolated cases, but nothing like the number one killer that we see now. Yet Psalm 104 says God gave man bread to strengthen and nourish the heart. Every nutrient to break down fat and cholesterol is in wheat, inositol, choline, B6, vitamin E, lecithin. It's all there. Cholesterol. And that's another thing. My first testimony outside of my family, lady called me before breakfast one morning, said, it's the bread. It's got to be the bread. That's why I call them my It's the Bread story. She goes, my cholesterol dropped 85 points in 1 month and all I've changed is the bread. I know it's the bread. She goes, I've been trying to get my cholesterol down for 3 years. 3 different doctors, multiple medications, and nothing has helped. And the bread that she loved, I made for her. You know what it was? Cinnamon roll with cream cheese icing. She ate one after every meal, and that's what did it. So
that's a heck of a vitamin.
I'm like, pill or cinnamon roll with cream cheese icing, Metamucil or laxatives or bread. What do you want,
Well, your research about viruses is really fascinating. I'm seeing too many patients who have a resurgence of Epstein-Barr virus.
Yes.
And just lately, since all the COVID stuff. And so that's really, makes me wonder if that might be something to have people try and just, send them this podcast.
Well, and not only that, but, so not only are the grains the most nutrient dense food God's given us. It's only really slightly deficient in vitamin A, and then vitamin C, vitamin D, and then B12. But so eat your fruits, eat your vegetables, get outside in the sunshine with no sunscreen, and then get your B12 from the foods that God has given us for that. So one thing that we don't understand is the fiber. For so long, they thought, there's no nutritional value in fiber. It just helps you eliminate. But now they have, well, not now, but years ago, they discovered When that fiber that cannot be digested by your body is dumped into your large intestine, your bowels, to be eliminated, those good gut organisms, microbiome, good bugs, if you want, whatever you want to call them, that live there, guess what their food is? Their food is that undigested fiber. And as they feed on that, they ferment it. It's called gut fermentation. They produce in your gut natural antibiotics, because I tell people they don't want the bad guys living there in their house either. A host of B vitamins, vitamin K, and that form of vitamin K that those organisms produce, it all gets absorbed through the walls of your colon. That form of vitamin K is the form that helps your bones lay down and absorb the calcium. So yeah, fatty acids, butyric acid is one that they produce. That is, they've so much research on butyric acid, or butyrate, whatever you want to call it. It is the food for the cells that line your gut lining, anti-carcinogenic properties, So I've read, studies and doctors that talk about 75, 85% of your immune system is not those T killer cells and those white blood cells. Yes, those are great. It's those gut organisms. They're already doing the job for you, to help fight those pathogens. So this is something besides the vitamins and the minerals and the nutrients that we get from wheat itself. Look what else it's doing. We have a little vitamin factory going on in our gut. That's amazing.
Which is so logical. We should not be having to take a handful of pills to feel good. So as a food scientist, Sue, tell us about the difference between food allergies and food sensitivities or food intolerances.
Yeah. So the technical definition of an allergy, a food allergy, is an adverse response, sometimes intense adverse response to a protein component of the food. So like a dairy allergy is typically you can't break down the casein or the protein component of that milk. Whereas an intolerance is usually from something else. So like lactose intolerant, you can't break down the sugar component of that dairy. And some of it could just be technical terms, but then a sensitivity, you just kind of, you maybe have stomach issues or digestive issues, bowel issues, GI tract issues. I hate to call it stomach issues because it's not really, but so that would be more of a sensitivity. Maybe you do get a snotty nose or something like that. So what I have found, though, is yes, we have those issues to the bread in the store. And here's something I want to point out. Gluten. Gluten gets a really bad rap. It is blamed now for everything. And in all my 34 years of studying, this is the first time I've seen functional medicine, alternative medicine, and allopathic medicine all jump on the same bandwagon. No grain, no dairy, no gluten. That's the bad guy. Gluten, gluten, gluten. Well, we need to understand what gluten is. Gluten, all it is, there is two unique proteins, gliadin and glutenine, that are found in the wheat family of grain. No other family of grain has them. When you grind wheat into flour and then you hydrate that flour, this stretchy substance called gluten forms from those two proteins. That's what it does. You can stir up flour and water and just wait for it to, just sit it there for a couple of hours. Don't knead it or anything. You'll come back and it'll be stretchy because you hydrated that flour. That is all gluten is. Okay. So, and who put those proteins in that wheat? God did. It's been there since the beginning of time. And that is why wheat, since the beginning of time, is the king of baking, particularly yeast bread or sourdough leavened bread, okay? Because it must have those stretchy strands of protein to trap the carbon dioxide gas that the yeast produces and lets that bread rise. That's what enables that bread to rise. So that's what gluten is. Okay, so you're like, where are you going with this, Sue? Well, and then allergies. So if it's a protein component, now, here's what I want people to understand. Carbohydrate digestion begins in your mouth. You chew your food. Yeah. So put your fork down between every bite. Like you were saying, chew your food. Your saliva has an enzyme called amylase that helps start breaking down those carbohydrates. When you swallow that food, goes into your stomach. For all practical purposes, carbohydrate digestion stops and protein digestion begins. Protein digestive enzymes must have an acid environment to work. So we're fearfully and wonderfully made. We have cells that produce acid. Acid in our stomach brings that pH down to about 1. That could eat a hole in your stomach and most anything else. We're fearfully and wonderfully made. God created cells around our stomach lining that makes mucus to protect it. But then that acid environment has to be there for those protein digestive enzymes to digest proteins. Okay. So I don't want to oversimplify, but listen to what we're doing. People have acid reflux. Their stomach acids or their stomach juices are coming back up their esophagus and burning. The problem is not too much acid, it's actually too little acid, because we have a flap on our esophagus that closes to keep that stomach acid from coming back up. It is stimulated to close if the environment in the stomach is pH 1 to 3, maybe. Okay. So what's the medical treatment for acid reflux?
Proton pump inhibitors.
Proton pump inhibitors. Let's reduce the acid. So now maybe it doesn't burn as much when you have the reflux, but it's not correcting the problem. In fact, it's inhibiting and discouraging and limiting protein digestion. Proteins don't get digested properly. Guess what happens? They lay down the villi in your gut, leaky gut, sensitivities. Then if you don't digest it, then your system starts thinking, this is a foreign substance. Well, what did I say gluten is? 2 proteins. What is an allergy? Adverse reaction to proteins. Now, I think there's some other situations going on, like, what vaccines are grown on and just the nasty toxins that are in our foods, the colors, the dyes, the preservatives. There's so much else. But I don't want to oversimplify. While I don't want to oversimplify, we got to think about that. Okay. So what's the answer? The answer is get the right acidity in your stomach, get healthy so your stomach can produce that good stomach acid, and get those proteins being digested properly. And I find it so interesting over the last 10 or 15 years, when the whole gluten thing really just became the enemy of everything. I hear people, I get fever blisters. I get cramps. I get a headache if I eat anything with gluten in it. They're comparing that to the bread in the store. And that's what they're calling gluten. And so they go off of that. Well, anybody that goes off that bread in the store is going to feel better and going to eliminate some symptoms, but it's not sustainable and it's not healthy. And what I am finding is that now there is true celiac. That's genetic. Right. You're born with it. I get that. You probably won't be able to ever eat wheat, but that's less than 1%. Less than 1% of Americans have true genetic celiac. What's being diagnosed celiac today? You have all the symptoms. You don't digest proteins. Guess what's going to happen? You're going to lay down those villi. So they do a scope and, they saw, my villi is destroyed, blah, blah, blah. Well, these people that aren't true genetic celiacs, they are finding they can eat the 100% freshly ground whole grain bread. Not only can they eat it and tolerate it, they are getting well. They're coming off of all kinds of medications, because here's the thing I'm hearing over and over for these people that are diagnosed celiac or gluten sensitivity or gluten intolerant. The next thing they know, they go gluten-free, which the gluten-free bread in the store is terrible. They go gluten-free. Fresh. Then the next thing you know, they have a dairy sensitivity, dairy allergy or whatever, intolerance. Then the next thing you know, they can't eat this, they can't eat that. I had one lady come in my class. She was in tears. She was like, I am so glad I found this. She goes, I was down to 7 foods that I could eat. 7. And she
I
goes,
see this all the time.
yeah, I bet you do. And she goes, this bread has healed me. It has healed my gut. I now can eat. I had another young lady, I think it's episode 114. Her name is Hannah Wright. She shared that she went gluten-free all these years. I don't remember how many years, a long time. She lived on a farm. She couldn't drink her raw milk. She couldn't eat her farm-raised eggs. The next thing you know, she said she started milling with fear and trembling, and she had to work through some little bit of discomfort. And everybody thinks, oh, I'm discomfort. Well, maybe it's cleaning you out and causing some extra activity there. She hung in there. And she goes, I now can drink my milk. I can now eat my eggs. I don't have any sensitivities at all. I can eat everything. And, and then another episode 66 of Sue's Healthy Minutes. I encourage everybody. That's one of my favorites. Anybody with gluten sensitivity or think they have to be gluten-free. And she was actually diagnosed with celiac. And if anybody I would think maybe was a true genetic celiac, I would think Sarah Valentine possibly could. And she says, I don't know if God supernaturally healed me or if I really had a misdiagnosis. But with fear and trembling, 15 years she had been gluten-free, and she had been sickly all through high school. She goes, I just thought everybody dealt with stomach aches and stomach pain and diarrhea and headaches. But her mom and brother heard about me. Actually, the wart story, her brother had a child with warts, and they heard a commercial that I did on warts. And so they started making the bread. The mom had been gluten-free with Sarah, just to support her, and because they were making everything. So the mom and the brother start doing this. Sarah's off at college. She comes home one weekend and they're like, Sarah, you got to try this. And she's like, no. They finally convinced her to try just a little bit. No reaction. She said, Sue, I slept the best that night that I had ever. I had no headache, and I pooped the best I pooped in 15 years the next morning. And she goes, we went out, bought all kinds of supplies. I made bagels and cinnamon rolls and all kinds to take back to college with her. And she just sent me an email or text just last week or the week before. Her baby is a year old eating the bread, and she's just so happy. And that's what I want to encourage people. If you're not true genetic celiac, and most of the time, and that's why I say Sarah could have been the most typical, believable diagnosis. Usually you're diagnosed 7 to 10 years old, and you're that sickly child, just always having stomach cramps and diarrhea and blah, blah. But if you're 20 and 30 and 40, and now you're diagnosed and you've been eating bread all your life, and all of a sudden you're diagnosed, I would say the chances are very good that you're not true genetic celiac. It's something I finally found a scientific study. They called it non-genetic celiac disease. And you know what they said reverses it? Probiotics, getting that good organisms back, and whole grains, high fiber. And another thing, that word of caution there, that I've done some studies as a microbiologist, that is really my jumping off place. Gluten-free diets, it said, really upsets the microbiome. Actually, they're finding it increases the pathogenic organisms and decreases the good, healthy organisms that keep those in check. It makes you more susceptible to E. coli and C. diff and all of these. That's pretty alarming. And if you don't really need to be gluten-free, it's actually dangerous to be gluten-free.
Sue, I actually see that via the GI map testing because, I'm just learning from you.
Yeah.
This is such new information in my functional medicine world, and super interesting because the GI map is a quantitative PCR test. So it's very accurate. So we can look at, I can really check this out because I'll see people who've been gluten-free for 7 years and all of this, these overgrowth bacteria, all the ones you mentioned, E. coli. And so this is super fascinating. Just because we can test it.
Yeah. Oh, wow. That's amazing. That's amazing. Wow. Well, I think I need to have you on my podcast so you can talk about what you do. I think this is so fascinating because people are asking, where can I get help? What can I do? And like I said, it saddens me that conventional, allopathic, and even alternative functional, they're all downplaying wheat. And I'm like, and saying it's horrible and go off of wheat and go off of dairy. Yet that's not the biblical view of things. And, I tell people, I think the Lord gave me a kind of a revelation. Hold on a minute. So I would be like, I said, that would be like me holding up this piece of paper and saying, this is a tree. This is not a tree. Doesn't give you shade, doesn't give you wood. It's made from a tree. And that's the problem. They're saying that stuff that we're selling and marketing as bread is wheat. That is not wheat. That is a gross, I don't know what.
Well, it's not even the same language. That's why I so appreciate the story you told at the beginning. You clarified this for people because I'm going to get a lot of calls on this. I promise you. And, and it's one of those things, if people are not a certified celiac patient, why not try it? Because when all those things you mentioned, pooping every day, warts going away, headaches going, energy returning, that's all about relationships.
Yeah.
That's all about relationships because people feel poorly and they stay home. Or a 17-year-old with warts. I mean, you're staying home.
And she was so embarrassed. She wouldn't swim in public with her friends. She wore, it was middle of July. She was in blue jeans because she had a patch on her leg about this big. And, and she was devastated, and she was a beautiful girl, and they were all in her hairline, in her eyebrows. You didn't look at her and go, oh my gosh, your whole face is covered with warts. But she was very embarrassed by it. And, I tell people being healthy to me is not just not being sick often. Being healthy to me is not just not having heart disease or cancer or diabetes. Being healthy to me is having the energy to do what God has called me to do and not being drug dependent. I don't want to not be able to go to Tanzania or Haiti or Uganda or Kenya or wherever. And I can't go because I can't get my, what if I have a heart attack, or what if I can't get my medication? What if I get stuck there, or I just don't have the energy? No. I'm going to be 70 years old next week, and I want to just be able to work and do what God's called me to do until He takes me home. So, Amen.
I 100% agree. Yeah. And I always say, Sue, we don't want to be normal in this world.
No,
because normal is dehydrated, irritated, constipated, frustrated, overscheduled, overstimulated, undernourished, underrested, and totally stressed out. So normal can't be our goal. We want optimal. We want to live our life to the fullest. We want to live out our purpose and enjoy the people in our lives that God's given us. And
not living at the doctor or the ER or the urgent care all the time.
Yeah.
In the 25 years of raising my children, we went to the doctor twice for an illness. 9 children. That's
amazing.
Some people go more than that in a week. And yet that's what we saw. Twice they needed antibiotics. I'm not opposed if we need it, but oh man, antibiotics disrupt the whole microbiome. And it's just, and the prescribing steroids, the overuse of steroids, that one's really scary because that just shuts down your adrenal gland. And that's, an allergy related organ, so there's a lot going on. And when people say I don't have the money or I don't have the time, I'm like, wow, how do you want to spend your time living life and enjoying relationships, or, spending your money at the doctor on medicine or whatever? Yeah.
We want to live life, and
we want to live life.
Everybody listening wants to live life.
Yeah.
My listeners want vitality, and you've given everybody food for thought. And so how can they learn more about you, listen to your podcast, give us all your info?
Yeah. So the podcast is called Sue's Healthy Minutes. It's on any podcast platform. I laugh and tell people you can tell Siri to play me and you can tell Alexa to play me if you're tuned in with those. You can go to our website, breadbeckers.com, and that's bread like you eat, Bread Beckers, our last name with an S.com. You can find the podcast there as well. And I encourage everyone, sign up for our email newsletter. There's lots of online classes on our YouTube channel, Bread Beckers YouTube channel. We have, and I would encourage everyone to find the video on our YouTube channel called Real Bread, the Staff of Life. It's 3.5 hours, but it will, like it did me, it will blow your mind. It will just, you'll go, what? And so I just encourage that. And then, of course, we're on Facebook and Instagram, so you can find us there. And yeah, so breadbeckers.com. We have co-ops all over that help with shipping. Our machines ship free to all 50 states. Yeah. Our machines ship free. And then of course we have the co-ops because grains are heavy. So that helps with shipping there. But so breadbeckers.com, Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, and then Sue's Healthy Minutes.
Okay, we'll have all of that in the show notes.
Yeah.
And I can't thank you enough.
Yeah. And don't forget, this is a great book to start. And even like some of the nutritional information is called the Essential Home Ground Flour book. You can find it on our website as well.
Oh, that's great. Thank you. And thank you, listeners, for joining me and joining Sue. Because of you, we're in over 5,500 cities and 130 something countries. And join Sue on her social media outlets on Instagram. Join me on Instagram and on YouTube. And just make sure life stays delicious. Blessings until Blessings until next time.
Thank you, Debbie.
We'll close there. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you so much for having me. This was amazing. And I will be in touch because we need to let our listeners know about you and what you're doing.
Thanks.
They may not. Yeah.
You're just a joy. Well, my work basically is looking at the oral microbiome and how it disrupts the gut microbiome.
Wow.
But I give a lot of nutritional advice, and people are so afraid of bread.
I know they are, and they just need to know the truth, and the truth will set them free.
Well, I wanted to bring up that verse, and I forgot to, about the millstone. Don't take a millstone. Isn't that so fascinating?
I know where I was when I saw that in Scripture, and that is, I think, one of the most sobering scriptures. I can't believe I didn't bring it up because
I meant to. I had it here in Deuteronomy.
It's all right,
but it's okay. No, this was a beautiful podcast.
Yeah, they'll get it.
Beautiful.
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
They'll get it when they follow you on everything else. So,
I share it a lot.
Thank you for your time, and I hope to see you before long.
Okay.
In person.
Yes. Thank you so much for having me.
You're welcome. Hey, thank you. I know you're busy.
How did you hear about me?
Who? Dr. Ben.
Oh,
Edwards.
Okay, Dr. Edwards.
He was on the podcast. I heard him at Hack Your Health. And met him, with my work, pray for me. I am wanting to move more to sharing the gospel through my message.
Yeah.
My podcast is a health podcast, Vitality, and there's pieces in there, but I'm sick of the whole evolution thing, and I'm just sick of
I know, the hunter-gatherer.
I'm so sick of that.
That's not real.
No, and so I really just want to, God to show me, and I know He will. Yeah. But meeting you is so inspirational. And that's
I can't wait. We're going to connect and have you on. Tiffany's shaking her head going, yes, yes. So, So next week's my birthday week, so I'm kind of taking it off. But
happy birthday. Happy birthday. 70.
Thank you, Deb. Yes, major milestone here.
You don't look it. Nobody will believe it. I didn't want to interrupt you and say you won't believe it when you see it in the video. We're finding that the YouTube is starting to be a big place that people see these podcasts. So
very good.
They'll see that you look so youthful.
Well, you're very, very nice. Thank you, Debbie. Thank you so much.
Sue's Healthy Minutes podcast has been a presentation by the Breadbeckers Incorporated, located in Woodstock, Georgia. For more information, store hours, and learning opportunities, visit breadbeckers.com and follow us on Facebook and Instagram. Make sure to subscribe to this podcast and never miss an episode. Share this with 2 friends who would benefit from this information, and be sure to join us again next week for more of Sue's Healthy Minutes.